He offered his jacket to a shivering woman at the bus stop, not knowing she was a CEO who— Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. The wind cut through the city like a blade that night, the kind of cold that bit through layers and made even streetlights look lonely. Snow drifted down in steady sheets, covering the cracked sidewalk in silver. Beneath a flickering lamp at a nearly empty bus stop stood Henry Miles, his breath fogging in the air, his old olive jacket zipped up to his chin. In one hand, he clutched a worn manila folder, the last 5 rhymes he'd sent out this week, and in the other, a paper cup of coffee gone cold hours ago. 46 years old, once a structural engineer, now a man with no home address. He tried to rub warmth into his fingers, but it didn't help. The digital pharmacy sign across the street blinked 8:41 p.m. and 25F. The bus was late again. He sighed, tucking his chin into his collar, thinking about his son Noah. Somewhere across town, his boy was probably finishing homework in the foster home. Henry hadn't seen him in months. He whispered, "Soon, kiddo, soon." Just then, the sharp rhythm of heels broke through the wind. A woman was walking fast toward the stop, her business skirt whipping around her legs. No coat, just a white blouse already soaked by snow. Her hair clung to her cheeks, mascara smudged from melted flakes. She hugged her arms tight to her body, shivering uncontrollably. Henry turned slightly away, giving her space. She looked too clean, too out of place here, someone from a different world. But when another gust of wind slammed down the street, she gasped and flinched, her teeth chattering. Henry hesitated. His jacket wasn't much, threadbare at the sleeves, the zipper half broken. It was all he had left. Still, he took a slow breath, slipped it off, and stepped toward her. "You should take this," he said softly. She looked up, startled. "Oh no, I can't." "You need it more than I do." He smiled, tired but kind. "I've already lost enough today. This coat's the only thing I have left to give." Before she could protest, he draped it over her shoulders. The warmth startled her. It smelled faintly of soap and coffee, oddly comforting. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't have to." "I know," he interrupted gently. "But you look colder than I am." The bus headlights appeared through the falling snow, a low rumble echoing in the distance. She hesitated again, eyes flicking from him to the bus. "What's your name?" "Henry," he said simply. "I'm Claire." The bus doors hissed open. She stepped on, still clutching the jacket around her like armor. When she looked back through the frosted window, Henry was already walking away, shoulders hunched against the wind. The bus pulled out, disappearing into the white blur. Claire sat in silence, her breath still trembling. She didn't know it yet, but that old coat, its faded green fabric, its faint scent of coffee and rain would become the thread that tied their lives together forever. That night, the city slept under a sheet of snow, but Henry did not. He walked the quiet back streets, his boots leaving faint prints that the wind quickly erased. There was no rush. No one waited for him, no light in any window calling him home. His old truck sat behind an abandoned warehouse, its windshield frosted from the inside. He opened the door, the hinges groaning, and climbed into the cold cab. The air inside smelled faintly of oil, metal, and the past. From the glove compartment, he pulled out a small tin box. Inside was a faded photograph. His wife, Lily, smiling bright, and their son Noah, around 7 years old, with that same crooked grin. Henry traced their faces with his thumb. "Good night, Lil." "Good night, buddy," he whispered, voice shaking. He leaned back, pulled a blanket over himself, and closed his eyes. The hum of distant traffic sounded like an ocean far away. He dreamed of a house filled with laughter, of pancakes on Saturday mornings, of Noah's tiny hands holding a toy hammer beside him. Then the sound faded into the wind. Morning came gray and bitter. Henry sat up, breath fogging in front of him. He poured the last of his coffee from a thermos, cold but drinkable, and flipped through his folder. Another day, another round of applications. He still believed somehow that if he kept trying, something would turn. The sun barely pierced the clouds as he stepped outside. The city was waking up, car horns, distant sirens, people rushing in coats that cost more than everything he owned. He walked toward a construction site, a place he had been before, hoping maybe this time they needed help. "We are full, man," the foreman said without looking up. Henry nodded, forced a polite smile, and walked away. Across the street, a newspaper stand displayed the morning headlines. A headline read, "Infinity Group expands human value initiative." A photo of a young woman accompanied it, confident eyes, perfect hair, smiling before a sea of cameras. Claire Hamilton. The same woman from the bus stop. The name echoed in his mind, but he shook it off. The world she lived in was galaxies away from his own. He tightened his jacketless arms against the cold and kept walking. Elsewhere, in a glass office 50 floors above the same city, Claire sat at her desk, holding a cup of coffee gone lukewarm. Her assistant was speaking, but she was barely listening. On the edge of her desk lay a green jacket, his jacket. She had sent it for cleaning, but she could still smell traces of soap and rain. Inside one of the pockets she had found a folded piece of paper, a child's drawing of a man and a boy under a big yellow sundae. The words written in uneven crayon said, "Noah, I love you, Daddy." Claire had stared at it for hours the night before. It had done something to her. She had seen hundreds of proposals, thousands of numbers, but nothing had made her feel the weight of humanity like that simple drawing. "Claire?" her assistant repeated. "The board meeting starts in 10. Claire blinked and nodded. "Cancel it," she said quietly. The assistant froze. "Excuse me?" "Cancel it," Claire said again, eyes on the jacket. "I have something more important to do." A decision had settled in her like a quiet flame. She could not explain why, but she needed to find that man. The one who had given up his warmth without hesitation. The one whose name she only remembered because of the way he said it. Henry. By evening, she had already sent a request through her foundation's outreach team. "Look for a man named Henry Miles," she said. Mid-40s, possibly homeless, last seen at the 8th Avenue bus stop last night. The assistant hesitated. "Do you know why you are looking for him?" Claire looked out the window, the city lights glittering below like a million unanswered questions. "Because kindness like that does not just disappear," she said softly. "It deserves to be found." Down in the streets, as Henry settled by a construction dumpster for another cold night, he had no idea that somewhere above those clouds, someone was already searching for him. 3 days passed before Claire's team found a trace. A volunteer from a downtown shelter called to report a man named Henry who sometimes came by for coffee and bread. Claire went herself. The shelter was small, tucked between 2 graffiti-covered buildings on the edge of the city. Inside, the air smelled of soup and disinfectant. People lined up quietly, some with blankets, some with stories no one had time to hear. Claire stepped through the door in her wool coat, drawing curious glances. She stood out instantly, polished and out of place, but her gaze was gentle. Behind the counter, a woman with kind eyes recognized her. "You are looking for Henry Miles?" Claire nodded. "He came by yesterday," the woman said. "Took a sandwich, left early, said he was heading toward the old construction yards near the river." Claire thanked her and turned to leave. The woman called after her, "He is a good man, ma'am, you can tell. Just tired." The drive to the river took 20 minutes. The snow had turned to dirty slush, and the sky hung low, heavy with gray. Claire's driver slowed the car as they approached a fenced-off area full of machinery and half-finished buildings. Then she saw him. Henry stood near a steel frame, holding a clipboard and talking to a foreman. His clothes were worn, his hands red from the cold, but there was focus in his eyes. Claire stepped out before the driver could open her door. Her heels sank into the wet ground as she walked toward him. Henry turned, confused at first, then startled. "Miss Hamilton?" he asked uncertainly. "Do you remember me?" she asked, smiling faintly. He blinked, looking down at the jacket she carried neatly folded in her hands. "I thought I would never see that again," he said quietly. "I wanted to return it in person," Claire replied, "and to thank you properly." He shook his head. "You already did. You stayed warm. That is all that matters." Claire studied him for a moment, noting the humility in his voice, the same steady calm from that freezing night. "You said you had lost enough that day," she said. "What did you mean?" Henry hesitated, the wind tugging at his sleeve. "Just life," he said simply. "My wife, my home, my son. Everything that made the world make sense." The words came out flat, as if he had said them too many times to still feel them. Claire's throat tightened. "I am sorry," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "Do not be. I still wake up every morning. That is something. She nodded, unable to look away. There was something about his quiet resilience that both unsettled and inspired her. Henry, she said finally, I would like to offer you a job. He blinked, taken aback. A job? Yes, she said. At Infinity Group. We run a community initiative called Human Value. We focus on real-world empathy in the workplace. I think you could help us. Henry laughed, a short, uncertain sound. Ma'am, I have not worn a tie in years. I am not sure your people want someone like me. They do not know that yet, Claire said. But they will. You taught me something that night, and I want others to learn it too. Henry looked at the muddy ground, torn between disbelief and pride. Why me? He asked. Claire smiled. Because you did not think twice before giving away your only coat. You did not do it for praise or to be seen. You did it because it was right. That is exactly what my company needs to remember. He was silent for a long moment, the distant clang of metal filling the air. Finally, he nodded slowly. I will think about it, he said. That is all I ask, she replied. As she turned to leave, she handed him her card. Call me when you are ready, Henry. He watched her card disappear into the mist, the white letters of her name catching the light. In his pocket, the card felt heavier than it should have, like a door quietly waiting to open. Henry stared at the business card long after Claire's car vanished into the fog. Infinity Group. The letters gleamed in embossed silver under the streetlight. For a long moment, he thought about throwing it away, convincing himself it was a gesture of pity, a rich woman's attempt to ease her conscience. But something in her eyes that day had not been pity, it was respect. That was what confused him most. That night, he sat in his truck staring at the card resting on the dashboard. What are you doing, Henry? He muttered to himself. You do not belong in her world. Yet the next morning, before he could talk himself out of it, he was standing at the front desk of Infinity Group. The lobby alone could have been a museum, all glass and marble and soft music echoing through the air. The receptionist looked up, her polite smile flickering when she saw the man in the old work jacket. Can I help you, sir? I am here to see Miss Claire Hamilton, he said, holding up the card like proof that he was not lost. Her eyebrows rose. Do you have an appointment? Not exactly, he said. But she told me to call when I was ready. I suppose this is me calling. Before the receptionist could respond, Claire appeared at the end of the hallway, wearing a tailored navy suit and that same calm focus in her eyes. It is all right, she told the receptionist. He is expected. Henry blinked. I am? Claire smiled. You are now. She led him through the corridor, the faint click of her heels echoing against the floor. Inside her office, floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline, sunlight spilling across the polished desk. I was not sure you would come, she said. Henry shrugged. I was not sure either. Sit, please, Claire said, gesturing to the chair. This is not a charity. What I am offering is purpose. You will work with our foundation to help design programs for people rebuilding their lives. Housing, retraining, emotional support. You will bring your perspective. Henry laughed quietly, shaking his head. You want me to teach your executives how to be decent human beings? Something like that, she said with a half smile. People forget that empathy is a skill. You live it every day. He looked out the window at the glittering skyline. I used to design buildings, you know, hospitals, schools. I thought I was building things that would last. You still can, she said softly. Just a different kind of structure this time. He studied her face. There was no arrogance there, only sincerity. Finally, he nodded. All right, I will try. Over the next few weeks, Henry's life shifted in small, steady ways. He arrived early, dressed simply but clean, sitting in on meetings where words like sustainability and impact model floated above his head. At first, the staff looked at him with polite confusion, unsure why a man like him had been brought into their sleek corporate world. But then they listened. Henry spoke quietly, never preaching, but his stories carried weight. He talked about the cost of losing a home, the shame of being invisible, the small acts that could change everything. Soon, people began to linger after meetings, asking him questions, taking notes. Claire watched from a distance, her pride growing quietly. One evening, as they left the building together, she said, You have changed the air in this place, Henry. It feels human again. He smiled. Maybe they just needed someone to remind them. She looked at him then, really looked, and for the first time since they met, she saw something beyond gratitude in his eyes. connection. They stood there in the fading light, the city humming below, two lives that never should have crossed now moving in rhythm. Claire cleared her throat softly. Would you join me tomorrow? There is a site visit to one of our community projects. I would like your opinion. Henry nodded. Of course. After all, I work here now. She laughed, the sound light and genuine. For a man who had lost everything, Henry suddenly realized he had found something more valuable than shelter or food. He had found purpose, and maybe, just maybe, the start of something else he did not dare name yet. The next morning, the sky was clear for the first time in weeks. Claire met Henry in front of the Infinity Building just as the company van pulled up. She wore a simple gray coat, no makeup, her hair tied back, while Henry had on a borrowed jacket that actually fit him for once. You ready? She asked. Not sure, he replied, smiling, but I am here. The drive took them 30 minutes north of the city, past the skyline and into an old industrial district, where warehouses had been converted into shelters and training centers. The sign outside read, Thomas's Place, community hub for families and veterans. Inside, volunteers were serving hot meals, sorting boxes of clothes, and talking to people sitting at long wooden tables. Claire greeted the staff while Henry watched quietly. The air smelled of coffee, detergent, and something that felt like hope. We started funding this place last year, Claire explained. But we have never truly understood it. I wanted you to see it through your eyes, not a report. Henry nodded slowly, walking past a wall filled with hand-painted notes of gratitude. One read, You did not just feed me, you saw me. He stood there for a long time. A volunteer approached a middle-aged woman with a bright scarf. You are Henry, right? Claire told us you might stop by. That is me, he said awkwardly. You do good work here. So do you, she replied. People have been talking about you. Henry laughed. That cannot be good. Oh, it is, she said. They said you are the reason Claire started visiting more often. Henry glanced at Claire across the room, speaking to a small boy about his drawings. She did not need me for that, he said quietly. But the woman only smiled knowingly. Later, Claire and Henry sat on a bench outside the center, sharing 2 cups of coffee that had long since gone cold. You built this, Henry said. Not me. You could have stayed in your glass tower, but you are here. Claire shook her head. I was losing touch with what mattered. That night at the bus stop, when you gave me your jacket, you reminded me what real worth looks like. It is not power or money. It is decency. Henry looked down, his hands clasped around the cup. I used to think kindness was weakness, but maybe it is the only thing strong enough to survive. A quiet fell between them. Comfortable, real. The sun was dipping behind the buildings, painting the sky in streaks of gold. Claire broke the silence. There is a gala next week. It is the annual Infinity Charity Ball. I want you there. Me? Henry asked, startled. I am not exactly black tie material. Then I guess I will have to teach you, she said with a playful smirk. You cannot refuse. You are part of this now, he chuckled, shaking his head. You really do not take no for an answer, do you? Not when I believe in something, she said, her eyes steady on his. Or someone. The words lingered in the cold air, heavier than either expected. The next few days moved quickly. Claire arranged for Henry to have a suit fitted, something simple but elegant. The tailor commented that he looked like a man who carried stories in his shoulders. Henry only smiled. When the night of the gala arrived, the ballroom was a sea of light and luxury chandeliers, crystal glasses, people in gowns that shimmered like liquid. Henry stood near the edge of the crowd, uncomfortable but curious. Claire found him, wearing a dark blue dress that caught the light every time she moved. You clean up well, she teased. So do you, he said softly, and for a moment they forgot about the crowd around them. Then the microphone clicked, and an announcer's voice filled the room. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our guest of honor for this year's Human Value Initiative, Mr. Henry Miles. The applause was immediate, but Henry froze. His eyes darted to Claire, shocked. She smiled reassuringly. Go on, she whispered. You earned it. Henry took a breath, his heart pounding as he stepped toward the stage, completely unaware that this would be the moment everything changed. For a moment, Henry could not move. The sound of applause rolled through the ballroom like distant thunder, echoing off marble and glass. Dozens of faces turned toward him, executives, donors, people who had never known a day without comfort. He stood frozen at the edge of the crowd, His breath caught somewhere between disbelief and fear. Claire's gentle nod grounded him. Slowly, he walked toward the stage. The bright lights hit his face as he reached the microphone, his reflection shimmering across the polished floor. He took a shaky breath. "I am not used to talking to rooms like this," he began, his voice low but steady. "Usually, it is just me, a coffee cup, and a lot of silence." A few people chuckled politely, but Henry's tone shifted, genuine and quiet. "A few months ago, I was living in my truck. I had lost my job, my home, and somewhere along the way, I started to lose myself too. Then one night, when the snow was falling hard, I saw a woman standing at a bus stop, freezing. I gave her my jacket. It was not a big thing. It just felt like something decent to do." He glanced toward Claire, who stood near the back, her eyes shining. "Turns out that small thing changed everything. It reminded me that kindness travels. It moves from one person to another until it finds its way back home." The room was utterly silent now. Henry took another breath, his voice softening. "I do not belong in this world of suits and lights, but maybe that is the point. Maybe we are all here to remind each other what real worth looks like. And tonight, I just want to thank the woman who reminded me that I still had something to give." His words hung in the air like a prayer. When he stepped back, the applause came again, louder this time, raw and real. Claire felt her throat tighten. People were standing now, clapping not out of politeness but out of something deeper recognition. As the music swelled again and the event moved on, Henry slipped away from the stage, blending into the edge of the crowd. Claire found him a few minutes later near the balcony, looking out at the city lights. "You were incredible," she said softly. "You turned that room inside out." Henry smiled faintly. "I just told the truth. Sometimes that is enough." Claire stepped closer, her voice lowering. "You made them remember what we are supposed to stand for." He looked at her then, eyes full of something she could not name, respect, gratitude, maybe something more. "You did that," he said. "You gave me a chance to stand again." Before she could answer, a tall man in a tuxedo approached, interrupting them. "Miss Hamilton, the press would like a statement about your humanitarian experiment. They are calling it the Billionaire and the Beggar." Quite the story. Henry stiffened. Claire's expression darkened. "It is not an experiment," she said sharply. "It is a partnership." The man gave a smug smile. "Of course, but the board might not see it that way." He turned and walked off before she could reply. Claire exhaled slowly, frustration flickering across her face. Henry shook his head. "You see, this is why people like me do not belong here." "Do not say that," she said, her tone firm. "You belong wherever integrity lives. Let them talk. They will not just talk, Claire. They will use it. Against you." "Let them," she said. "They can take headlines. They cannot take truth." He looked at her, stunned by the conviction in her voice. Somewhere below them, cameras flashed, and champagne glasses clinked, but up here, it was just them, two souls standing in a storm of wealth and judgment. "You did not have to fight for me," Henry said softly. "Maybe I needed to," Claire replied. "Maybe it is the first real fight that ever mattered." The night wind swept across the balcony, carrying away the noise of the gala. For the first time, they stood in silence that did not feel empty, but full of trust, of something beginning to take root. The next few days after the gala were a blur. News outlets ran the story endlessly. Billionaire CEO hires homeless man. Is it charity or strategy? Cameras camped outside Infinity Group, flashing every time Claire entered or left the building. The board members demanded a meeting. Inside the glass conference room, Claire sat at the head of the table, her jaw tight, as executives exchanged sharp whispers. "You have turned the company into a circus," one said. "Investors are nervous," added another. "They think you are compromising professionalism for a publicity stunt." Claire's voice was calm but edged with steel. "Professionalism does not mean losing humanity. Henry Miles represents the values we claim to stand for." "He is an ex-laborer living in a truck," someone countered. "Do you realize what kind of image that sends?" Claire met his gaze. "Yes, it sends the image of resilience, not failure." The room went silent for a heartbeat. "If that is not the image you want, then maybe the problem is not him," she said before walking out. In her office, she found Henry waiting, hat in his hands. "I saw the reporters downstairs," he said quietly. "They are tearing you apart because of me." "Let them," she replied. "They are wrong." "No, Claire," he said, his voice heavy. "They are right about one thing. You do not deserve this storm. I am just a man trying to find his feet again, and somehow I pulled you into the mud with me." She shook her head. "You did not pull me anywhere. I walked in because I believe in you." He looked at her then, really looked, and there was something behind his eyes that felt like surrender. "I think it is time I step back," he said softly. Claire froze. "What do you mean? The program will survive without me. You have already changed the way people think. Let me go before I do more harm." "Henry, no," she said quickly, her voice trembling slightly. "If you walk away now, they win. The cynics, the people who believe kindness has no place in power, they win. Maybe they already have," he said, turning toward the door. "Do not do this," she said, almost whispering. "Not like this." He paused, his hand on the doorframe. "Thank you for everything," he said, "for letting me feel seen again." And then he was gone. For the first time in years, Claire felt powerless. The next morning, headlines worsened. Infinity's Human Value Project suspended amid controversy. Anonymous sources claimed Henry had been a fraud, that his story was exaggerated to manipulate investors. Claire slammed her office door and called her communications director. "Find out who started this," she demanded, "and clear his name." "Claire," the woman said carefully, "it might be too late. The board is already voting to terminate the project." Claire's chest tightened. She looked out the window at the city that once seemed so bright. Now it looked distant, cold, and heartless. That evening, she drove without direction, ending up near the river, where it had all begun. The streetlights shimmered across the water, broken and wavering. She parked and got out, clutching the old green jacket she had kept all this time. "You taught me not to give up," she whispered into the wind. "So, where are you now, Henry?" Meanwhile, across town, Henry sat in his truck reading one of the tabloids that carried his face on the cover. The words "fake hero" burned across the page. He closed it slowly, his jaw tightening, then looked at the photo of Noah taped to the dashboard. "Guess we are still learning the hard way, huh, buddy?" he murmured. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, but answered anyway. "Mr. Miles," a voice said, urgent and unfamiliar. "This is Detective Gray from the Financial Crimes Division. We have reason to believe someone within Infinity Group has been using your name to cover up embezzlement. We need your help." Henry blinked. "What?" "You are not in trouble," the detective said quickly. "But Claire Hamilton might be." The line went silent for a moment. Then Henry's voice hardened with purpose. "Tell me what you need me to do." "Lummo." Henry sat in stunned silence as Detective Gray's words sank in. The idea that someone was using his name, twisting his story to frame Claire, made his blood run cold. "Who would do that?" he asked. "We believe one of the senior board members, possibly Martin Kessler. He filed false transactions under your outreach project's account. The trail leads back to offshore accounts connected to him, but we need proof," the detective said. Henry's mind raced. "What kind of proof?" "Internal documents. Access logs. Anything that shows Claire was not involved. You worked with her closely, right?" "Yes," Henry said. "Then you know where she keeps her files." Henry looked out at the dark city. "I know exactly where." Within an hour, he was driving toward Infinity Group, headlights slicing through the rain. He parked behind the building and slipped inside using the staff entrance. He still had his badge from the project. The hallways were dim, echoing with the hum of security lights. He made his way to Claire's office, his heart pounding. Her desk was spotless as always, but the filing cabinet in the corner held what he needed. He found a folder labeled Human Value Initiative Grant Allocations. Inside were spreadsheets, digital transfer receipts, and authorization signatures. Most were legitimate, but one caught his eye: a payment of $200,000 to a non-existent vendor, approved under his forged signature. "Got you," he muttered. Suddenly the door opened. "Mr. Miles," a voice said smoothly. Martin Kessler stood in the doorway, expensive suit, cold smile. "I was wondering when you would show up." Henry froze. "You did this," he said quietly. "You used my name." "You should be grateful," Kessler sneered. "Without me, you would still be sleeping in your truck. This little charity circus was always going to end, but you made it useful. A perfect scapegoat." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Claire Hamilton got soft. "She forgot that business is not about feelings. I am just restoring balance." Henry clenched his fists. "You are destroying her reputation. Reputation is currency. Easily spent, easily replaced. Now hand me those files and walk away before you lose what little you have left." Henry shook his head. "No." Kessler's expression hardened. "Wrong answer." He reached for the papers, but Henry backed away. The noise must have triggered the motion sensors, because the security lights flared to life, flooding the room in white. Kessler cursed under his breath. Henry used the distraction to grab his phone and snap photos of the documents. "You just made a big mistake," Kessler hissed. "So did you?" Henry said, his voice steady. "You forgot that truth has witnesses." Moments later, the security guards rushed in, alerted by the sensors. Claire appeared behind them, her expression a mix of confusion and fear. "Henry, what are you doing here?" she asked. He turned to her, holding up the folder. "Saving you," he said simply. The guards restrained Kessler as Detective Gray, and 2 officers entered through the elevator. "Martin Kessler, you are under arrest for embezzlement and fraud," the detective announced. Kessler's composure cracked for the first time as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. Claire looked from Henry to the officers, realization dawning in her eyes. "You came back for me," she whispered. Henry nodded. "You would have done the same." Later that night, when the police were gone and the building had emptied, Claire and Henry stood alone in her office. Rain tapped softly against the windows. "You could have walked away," she said. "You should have." Henry smiled faintly. "I tried once. It did not work." She stepped closer. "They will clear your name. The board will issue a statement. Everything you lost, we will fix it." "I do not care about my name," he said quietly. "I care about what it stands for. And you reminded me what that means." Claire reached into the drawer and pulled out the green jacket, placing it gently in his hands. "You gave me this when I was freezing," she said. "Now it is my turn to return the favor." Henry looked at the jacket, then at her, his eyes softening. "Claire, I never wanted anything from you." "Maybe," she said with a small smile, "but you gave me everything anyway." Outside, the rain slowed, the city lights glimmering against the wet glass. For the first time in a long while, the world felt right again. It had been 3 months since that stormy night in Claire's office, and everything had changed. The Human Value Initiative was reinstated with even greater support after the investigation cleared both Claire and Henry of any wrongdoing. Martin Kessler's arrest became the headline of the year, but the true story that captured hearts was the one the world had almost missed: the story of a man who had once given away his only jacket, and a woman who had given him back his life. The gala scandal faded, replaced by a documentary produced by Infinity Foundation titled One Kindness. It featured footage from Thomas's place, interviews with volunteers, and a quiet closing segment of Henry standing beside Claire, smiling under the evening light. Donations poured in from around the world. But Henry stayed the same. He still arrived early, greeting everyone with a nod and a warm good morning, still carried his coffee in the same dented thermos, still believed that kindness could outlast headlines. Claire, too, changed in ways she never expected. The world that once revolved around board meetings and quarterly reports now pulsed with purpose. She visited community centers weekly, not because it looked good, but because it made her feel alive. One Friday evening, she found Henry in the rooftop garden that overlooked the city, where the wind carried the smell of rain and blooming jasmine. He was fixing a wooden bench someone had broken earlier that week. "You never stop building things, do you?" she said, smiling. Henry chuckled. "Old habits. I like seeing something broken become whole again." She stepped closer. "That is exactly what you did to me." He paused, the hammer still in his hand. "What do you mean?" "You reminded me of why I started this work, of what I lost, chasing everything that did not matter." Henry looked at her, his eyes soft. "You did not lose it, Claire. You just forgot where you put it." They stood in silence, the city lights shimmering like fireflies beneath them. Finally, Claire reached into her coat pocket and pulled out something small wrapped in velvet. "You kept your promise to change this company," she said. "Now it is my turn to keep mine." She handed it to him. Inside was a small frame containing the drawing he had once left in the pocket of his jacket, the one from Noah. But beneath it, a new sketch had been added, drawn by Claire herself. 2 figures under a tree, one holding a jacket out to the other. The words at the bottom read, "One kindness can change everything." Henry stared at it, speechless. "You drew this?" he asked. Claire nodded. "I wanted you to know that what you did not just save me that night. It saved who I became after." His voice was barely a whisper. "You do not owe me anything." "Maybe not," she said softly, "but I want to give you something anyway." She took his hand, the cool breeze brushing between them. "Henry Miles, would you let me share this life with you, not out of gratitude, but out of choice?" He stared at her, stunned. For the first time in years, the world felt still, as if every broken piece of his life had finally found its place. "Claire," he said slowly, "that night at the bus stop I thought I was giving away my last bit of warmth. Turns out I was finding my home." Her eyes filled with tears, but she smiled, radiant. The city below glowed gold as the lights flickered on one by one, and above them, the first stars began to pierce through the twilight. Months later, their wedding was held quietly at Thomas's place, surrounded by the people whose lives had been touched by their kindness. There were no grand speeches, no extravagant decorations, just laughter, music, and warmth. On the wall hung Henry's old jacket, framed beside the drawing, a reminder of where it all began. As they danced slowly to the sound of distant applause and soft piano music, Claire whispered, "This was the best mistake I ever made." Henry smiled. "No," he said gently, "it was fate." And under the same stars that had witnessed their first meeting, they finally found what both had been searching for all along, not just love, but peace.